Alrighty. So we're gonna start off today really quickly talking about homework 2, which is gonna be a very different homework than anything you guys have done before. This was actually a homework, a similar format to what I had done in grad school, and it is very difficult. So please pay attention to this part. So the homework itself is a multiple choice, but instead of providing just the sort of one answer, instead you fill out a sheet where you give the probability that you think each answer is correct. And so I'll just give a quick example. Oops. 1 second. All right. So let's say for problem 1, you've got A is 1, B is 2, C is 3, and D is 4. You actually will be scoring points based off of a special formula, which is equal to score is equal to 5 plus 3.606. Some numbers times the natural log of the probability of the correct answer. Okay. So let's suppose the correct answer is C3, and you assign a value of 1 to 3 and 0 to the other ones. In this case, you will receive the full 5 points because you got the correct answer, and so that comes in at 5 points. So that's the most that you can get in a particular problem. But if you chose the wrong answer, if you chose D, for example, and you put 1 here and 0 here, then your score will be negative infinity, and you will immediately fail homework. So I encourage this every year. Don't put 1 next to an answer. You can kind of hedge your bets, right? And so this is essentially a way of getting you to elicit your own risk preference and level of risk for the score on your homework. Yeah, and so if you're not sure, like you could put 0.25 as the probability for all 4 of them, and that would correspond to 0 for that particular problem. So this will be curved to the other to basically the highest score in the class. So don't expect to get a perfect score on this. I think that's only happened once in like the last 5 years that I've taught this class. So do be careful when you are sort of strategizing the correct probability to put for your answer. Okay. The questions themselves are actually going to be slightly ambiguous. And so sometimes the answer may not be entirely obvious, and that's part of the sort of impetus of this homework, is to see how you sort of factor your risk into making that decision. All right, any questions about the homework? Is anyone confused, maybe? No? Okay. Well, the homework will be, I just posted it, so it should be available for everyone. So have a look, and yeah, it'll be due in the same amount of time, so next Wednesday. All right. Next, I want to talk about the project. So to make sure that everyone's starting to think about the course project, I'm going to ask for everyone to submit a short one-page description of the project so that you guys can start thinking about it. Background motivation, what you want to do, potentially what data that you're going to want to use, and maybe a short discussion of things that you might think are interesting or relevant coming out of the work. And as a reminder, you are allowed to pair up with one other person. So yeah, make sure to, if you want to form a group, to start to think about this ahead of time. And then please, before you submit it, reach out to me, come to office hours, or schedule a different meeting, or just email me ideas of what you want to do. That way I can just sort of keep everyone on track and make sure that the project is kind of feasible for the time frame. Okay, any questions about this? And I will make a post about this on Canvas as a reminder. No? All right. Okay, so the topic we'll be talking about today is decision making. So this is actually what the bulk of the homework will be based around. But this is a nice sort of introduction to a framework that you can use to make a particular decision based on some kind of rational behavior. And so this is very sort of helpful when thinking about alternative outcomes in modeling situations. And this will hopefully set up a nice sort of framework that will guide you in how you can structure a decision-making process. Okay, so the basic steps: you want to identify your objective, describe the context of the decision, think about what your options are, and then also think about uncertainty. And so the uncertainty part we'll cover a lot more in the coming lectures, but we're going to figure out how to do this, set up this structure today. And you can actually approach this in sort of an analytical way. And we're going to talk about a couple different sort of approaches to set up diagrams. There are these techniques: fundamental objective hierarchies, influence diagrams, and these are more qualitative approaches. You can do some quantitative methods with them, but usually when you get into that realm, you're talking about making decision trees. And so decision trees is where we're going to be spending most of the time today, but I will quickly cover these first two. Okay, so fundamental objectives hierarchy. This is basically a way that you can structure a network graph that will show you a hierarchy of your objectives and how you break that down into different decisions. And so this is just a really sort of basic example. Say your objective is to increase your lifetime earnings. How can you go about doing that? You can increase your current salary, you can marry rich, or you can go to school. And so each of those particular objectives or goals can also be broken down into more either decisions or objectives. And so under increase your current salary, you could find a new job. And the way that you would go about doing that is you could, update your resume or do some networking. And an alternative way to increase your salary is to get a raise, right? And so one way you can do that is do a better job. So all of this is essentially structuring your decision-making process so that you get progressive objective achievements that go into these higher tier hierarchies. Okay. We can break this down into a different sort of type of network. And so the influence diagram that we're going to be talking about uses these sets of symbols, which are also used in decision trees. And so this is also important to keep in mind. This notation is pretty important for figuring out both how to structure the problem, but also how to solve it. So the squares are usually notated as decision events, which means you get to decide which outcome coming out of the decision node to choose. There are circles, which are chance events, and those have probabilistic outcomes. So you don't get to choose any particular one, but there will be probabilities associated with all of the things coming out of your chance events. The diamond is the consequence or payoff, and then the square with rounded edges are calculations or constants. You won't see those really showing up in decision trees, but in influence diagrams, oftentimes you can use that as basically like an input-output function. So going back to the example of increasing your lifetime earnings, that might look something like this. So you can choose to go to school, you have some chance of finding a better job, and then the way in which your salary increases, there might be some kind of algorithm that determines that, and then your sort of full lifetime's earnings. Okay, so both this example, the influence diagram, and the hierarchy diagram, again, are mainly these qualitative approaches that are essentially helping to just structure your problem. And so if you have a particularly complex sort of decision-making problem, these will help break it down and structure them so that you can put them together in sort of like a nice logical manner. And these influence diagrams, you can, again, like I was saying, you can introduce a quantitative aspect to them where different boxes can, represent different values or have equations or probabilities associated with them going to the outcomes for any node. So it is possible to break this down quantitatively. And we're not going to get into that with influence diagrams, but we will start to talk about this with decision trees. Okay, so this last category is what we're going to be spending the bulk of the time today on. Okay, so a decision tree is read from left to right. You calculate the expected value of each option. And the whole point of doing this is essentially at every decision node, you want to be able to pick the best decision. So I think the easiest way to kind of show this is through example. And so we will show a sort of semi-real life example of constructing a decision tree. Okay. So in this case, we have two oil companies, Texaco and Pennzoil, and this actually was a real court case that happened. So they're embroiled in a legal battle, and let's say you are representing Pennzoil and you have to make a decision about what to do. So in the first decision, so you are suing Texaco and they offer a $2 billion settlement. And so your choices are basically, okay, should I take that settlement or should I counteroffer? And I can counteroffer with a $5 billion settlement. And let's say you've got a 17% chance that they're gonna pay that $5 billion. There's a 50% chance that they're gonna refuse and go to court. And then there's a 33% chance that Texaco counteroffers to settle for $3 billion. And then there's a second decision to make here, which is, okay, if they make that second counteroffer, should I take it or should I go to court? And in both of those cases, if you do end up going to court, you have a 20% chance to win $10 billion, a 50% chance to win $5 billion, and a 30% chance to lose, in which case you make no money at all. Okay, and so this problem is kind of an ideal type of problem to set up with a decision tree. There are a couple different decisions that you can make, and you want to essentially figure out what the best course of action is, right? And so we're gonna dive into that right now. So let's go to a whiteboard. Okay, so I will make I'm going to draw this out in a diagram. So the first decision that we're starting with, which I'll represent as this square, is, so we'll call this D1 for decision 1. So this is a decision node. So our first choice is to settle. And if we settle, then you end up with $2 billion. And then you can also choose no settlement. Okay, so that is our other option, in which case we hit a chance node. So this is a chance node, right? And as a reminder, the way that we can tell the difference is that the shape, if it's a square, it's a decision node. If it's a circle, it's a chance node. And there's 3 different outcomes of the chance node. The first one is, let's see, Texaco will accept, oh, actually, I'm not going to say no settlement. We're going to call this the counteroffer. Okay, so they're going to accept the counteroffer 17% of the time. And that's going to cost, and that will gain you $5 billion. Half of the time, it's going to go to court. And if you go to court, you go to another chance node, right? And the three things that can happen if you go to court are, so this is 20%, and you're gonna get 10.3 billion. This is another win, 50%, where you get 5 billion. And this one you lose. And that there's a 30% probability of that, in which case you make $0. Okay, and the last one is they make a counteroffer, a counteroffer. Okay, and so if they make a counteroffer, you can either choose to accept or you go to court. And if you go to court, then you end up with the same sets of probabilities as before. So 20%, 10.3 billion, 50%, 5 billion, and 30%, 0. Okay, so I'm going to do a little bit of coloring here so that we can be extra clear about where we're making decisions and where things are happening by chance. So we'll go like that. Okay, so all of these outcomes are probabilities. Okay, so I want to figure out for the places where I can make a decision, which decision I should be making. So we need to essentially calculate all of the expected values of each of our decisions. Oh, here, if we accept the counteroffer, oops, hang on, there we go. This is 3 billion. That's the counteroffer. Okay, so probably the two decisions that are the easiest to figure out are whether you accept the settlements in each of them, in each D1 and D2. So if I do EV, expected value of D1 settle, that is equal to $2 billion, pretty straightforward. And D2 settle is equal to $3 billion. Okay, and so now I need to compare against the other decision that I'm making. So to calculate the D2 court decision, I have to figure out the expected value associated with this branch. And then to calculate the D1 counteroffer, I have to figure out the expected value associated with this branch here. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. So we'll start with the D2 court 1, and that's going to be equal to, it'll be each of the outcomes multiplied by the probability of that outcome happening. So your expected value is equal to 0.2 times 10.3 plus 0.5 times 5. So this particular outcome is going to be equal to 4.56 billion. Okay, so if I were at this particular node, would I choose to accept the counter offer, the counter offer, or would I choose to go to court? What do you guys think?
Go to court.
We go to court, exactly. And that's because this value is greater than this value. So you will choose to go this way instead of going the other way. Okay, so then how do we go about calculating D1 court? So it's going to be essentially the same thing. Oh, actually, I did leave out one little detail. So notice that out of this chance node, you have a 17% chance here, 50% chance here, which means that we know that the bottom branch has to have a 33%. And that's because out of every chance node, the total probability of all outcomes has to sum to 1. Okay, so we actually know the expected value of this entire branch here is equal to 4.56 billion. So now we can go backwards and calculate, and we can calculate the expected value of making your first decision of counter offer. Oops, I should write it like this: counter offer. And the other thing is that because the court cases are the same, we actually also know the EV of this is equal to 4.56 billion. And that's just because these are equal on both branches. So the calculation would look something like 0.17 times 5 plus 0.5 times 4.56 plus 0.33 times 4.56. So this will end up equaling 4.6348 billion. Okay, so if we look at our first decision node, you will have a decision with an expected value of 2 billion and another decision with an expected value of 4.6, about 4.6 billion. Okay, and so in this case, if you are faced with this problem, then you would choose to make a counter offer, because your expected value of doing this decision an infinite number of times would be $4.6 billion versus $2 billion. Okay, and if you so happen to go all the way to your second decision node, then you would choose to go to court rather than accept the counter offer, because the expected value of going to court is higher. Okay, so does this make sense for everyone? Anyone have any questions or anything confusing about this?
really quickly, did you say that you would choose going to court rather than the counter offer?
Yes. So
I think I got lost a little bit at the end.
yeah, okay. So let's see. At the end of the day, you end up with this very there's a small amount of space to work with to show this diagram. So there's essentially two decisions that you can make here, right? It is your let me see. Show a mouse here. No. Okay. So you can either, for your first decision, you can choose to accept the settlement, or you can make a counter offer. And the way that you figure out which one to use is by calculating the expected value, which we've done, below, right? And so you need to couple your D1s together and your D2s together. And the decision that you're making is basically which one has a higher value. Okay, and so your particular question of settling or going to court is with decision 2. And with the second decision, you can take $3 billion, or you can essentially take $4.56 billion. So that's why you would choose to go to court. And in the first decision, essentially what you can choose is $2 billion or $4.6 billion. And so you would choose the counter offer because that's the one that's going to get you more money most of the time. Make sense? Okay. So barring any other questions, let's go back to the slides very quickly. Okay. So hopefully you guys can follow along there. Let's do another example that is in some ways simpler, but is actually kind of tricky. So I need a volunteer who wants to be my my guinea pig.
I'm game.
All right, great. So have you heard of this, the Monte Hall problem?
Yeah, vaguely, but not
Okay.
enough to remember it. So.
All right, that's fine. Okay, so I'm a game show host, and you are one of the contestants. You've got a pretty simple game here. There's 3 doors, 3 closed doors, and what I'm going to do. So I open all the doors, and I can show you that there are 2 goats. There's one goat behind one door, another goat behind another door, and then there's a car behind door number 3. And so I close the doors, and I get to switch everything around, and I'm going to ask you to pick a door. So go ahead and select the door.
Okay, 2.
So okay, you chose door 2. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to open one of the doors that you didn't choose. So I open door number 1, and I show you, hey, look, there's a goat here. Okay, and I close the door, and then I'm going to say, would you like to switch your choice from door 2 to door 3? And so what is your answer?
I think I remember that it actually matters. I would think that it wouldn't, but.
So why do you think it wouldn't matter?
Because it seems like, all right, you've shown me a goat. Now there's a 50-50 chance of one being a car and one being a goat.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, and this is the sort of common misconception is that it doesn't matter. But in fact, you'll find that if you switch doors, and you can actually do this in like a simulation to convince yourself of this. So if you switch doors, then you will actually get the prize with a higher probability than if you don't switch the doors. And so let's show an example of how to set up this problem in a decision tree. And again, this is probably one of the trickier trees to kind of to set up. And there's a couple different ways that you can do this, but I'll show one example. Okay. Alrighty. So in this case, we're actually going to start with a decision node. And in the decision node, there is a 2/3 chance that you got the wrong door, right? And a 1/3 chance that you got the right door. And so you then can make a decision about whether or not you want to switch your door or no switch. Switch and no switch. So in the case that you happen to choose the wrong door in the beginning, that means that when you switch, you get your outcome, which is a 1. So we'll say this is your car. And if you don't switch, then that's a 0, and that's your goat. The other 33% of the time, let's say you actually pick the car, and then you switched, you decide to switch doors. Well, then you get 0 because you'll end up getting a goat. But if you didn't switch, you would end up winning your car. So you can kind of do a backwards tree, and actually you could reassemble this tree so that the decision comes first. It's kind of working the probabilities backwards, but the tree ends up being a little bit more complex. But basically, you're going to have, right, so because the decisions are going to be the same, regardless of the door. So these are like correlated decisions. So your EV of switch is equal to 2/3 times 1 plus, right? So that's 2/3 times your switch decision plus 1/3 times your switch decision of 0. So your expected value is 2/3 if you do decide to switch, and your expected value of not switching is equal to 2/3 times 0 plus 1/3 times 1 equals 1/3. Yeah, so if you choose to swap the doors, you'll actually win the prize twice as often as if you didn't switch. Make sense? Any questions? Okay, let's take a quick 5-minute break here. So good point for this. Yeah, and I'll stick around, and if anyone has any questions right now, I'm happy to answer.
So Professor Jen, are you still there?
Yep, I'm here.
I just had a quick question. I arrived a little late, so I missed what you were saying about the homework completely. Are you saying essentially we say we're 100% sure of something and we get it wrong, then that like fails the whole thing for us? Or I just missed like right at the start what you were saying.
Yeah. So it's multiple choice, but instead of just circling one answer, you get the probability that you think each answer is correct. And so the more confident you are that an answer is correct, the higher you assign the probability to that answer. But my caution is to be conservative in that the amount of points that you get, the higher the probability, the like payoff is smaller. But if you get it wrong, the payoff is really negative, or the penalty is really negative. And so if you guess with a probability of 1 on the incorrect answer, you get a negative infinity. And you can figure out what the point value is going to be, because I actually will have the equation for the points corresponding to the probability in the homework assignment. So you kind of have to like strategize, how much you're willing to bet or risk on a particular problem. Does that make sense?
Okay, that makes sense. So it's not like if you say you're 0.5% sure, you don't. If you say you're like 0.5 sure, you don't get 0.5. Or
Yeah. It's like something like well, I can pull up the graph again. Let me see. So here, so if you get it correct and you say I'm 100% sure, then you get the full 5 points. But if you say I'm 80% sure and you get it correct, you'll get a little more than 4 points. If you're 50%, you'll get a little bit more than 2 points. And then if you're 25%, then it's 0, because you could put 25% for each of the 4 answers. But that's only if you get it right? If you put like, let's say you go 0.9, so you can get like 4.8 or something, and then you put 0.03 for the other 3, and it turns out that one of the other 3 are correct, then you're going to get like negative 20 points or something really small. Yeah, so it's like a strategy to figure out how confident you want to be, and so yeah, the like, I will say the like range of grades that I've seen on this go anywhere from negative infinity to I think the highest anyone's ever gotten is like 11 out of the 12, so something like 50 points. So yeah, it'll be up to you to figure out the best strategy on how to do that.
okay, cool, thanks.
Yep. Alrighty. Now let's talk about expected value of perfect information. So this is kind of an interesting concept. This is a way of saying how much you could value, or how much it makes sense to value specific outcomes in your decision tree. Okay, and so again, I think the best way to kind of demonstrate this is by example. Let's take a look at this. So let's remake this this example here. Oop. One moment. Okay, so you have this stock investment, and you are offered the following alternative: stock 1, stock 2, or savings. Okay, and so let's build our tree. So we have 3 decisions. So this is stock 1, stock 2, and savings. So the savings is the easiest. We're guaranteed 500 here. And for stock 1, we have 3 possible outcomes. You've got, it can go up, it can go down. Oh, sorry, it can be flat, not down. Flat, or it can go down, up, flat, down. And this happens with a 50% chance, 30% chance, 20% chance. Same here, 50%, 30%, 20%. And your profits are going to be 1,500 here, 100 here, or negative 1,000. And here, 1,500. Oh, sorry. This is 1,000, not 1,500. $200 here, or negative 100. Okay, so these are all the sort of corresponding outcomes that are listed here. And so we can figure out what our expected values are for making each of these decisions. So EV stock 1 is equal to 0.5 times 1,500 plus 0.3 times 100 plus 0.2 times negative 1,000. Okay, that equals 750 plus 30 minus 200. So 780, so 580. So 580. EV stock 2 is equal to 0.5 times 1,000 plus 0.3 times 200 plus 0.2 times negative 100. So that's equal to 500 plus 60, so 560 minus 20, so that's 540. And then our EV savings is equal to 500. Okay, so in this case, our decision is going to be to choose stock 1, right? Because that has the highest that has the highest return. Okay. However, let's suppose that you have the opportunity to guarantee any one particular outcome. Then the question would then become, how much are you willing to pay for that particular outcome? And so that's known as the value of perfect information. So let's take a look here. So let's keep in mind that we have each of these sort of payoffs here. The way that you would structure this is that I would actually then reconstruct my decision tree such that the chance node is actually my decision node. So let me clear this, and actually we'll just go to a new whiteboard. Okay, so the way that I would do this is to create a new decision node at the beginning where I can choose for my stock to go up, to be flat, and to go down. And in this case, there's another set of decisions that I can make, right? So I can do my high, my low, or my savings. Okay, and in the savings case, it's always going to be 500. And in this case, I'll get 1500 here. In the low, I would make 1000. And then in the flat, it would be 100 for the high. And then in the low, it would be, let me see, low flat would be 200. And let's see, in the saving, or in the down, you would have negative 1000 and negative 100. Okay. So these are all of my outcomes given sort of perfect information. So in the case where I know that that my stock is going to be going up, then I know that I would want to choose the high case. And in both of the cases where you're going flat or down, it's better to put your money into savings rather than to invest in the stocks, right? And so if I were to compare each of the outcomes then I would know, let's see, for the case where it's high, does anyone know, actually, does anyone remember what the number, our EV for the whole system was? Was it 580?
Yep.
Yeah. So the expected value of perfect information in the high case is that I would be willing to pay up to $920 to know that it is high, that you have a high outcome, right? And if it were flat, each of the corresponding ones would be, let's see, 0.3. Oh, sorry, I'm making a mistake here. You're supposed to do each of the high scenarios. So hang on. So it would be so half of the time I would be making $1,500, and then in both the 0.3, I would be making 500 plus 0.2, I would also be making 500. So this is equal to, let's see, 750 plus 0.3, that's 150 plus 100. So this is equal to $1,000. Okay, so basically this means 50% of the time we know that's going to be high. 30% of the time I know it's going to be flat, and 20% of the time I know it's going to be down. And if in each of those cases I'm allowed to pick my best outcome, which is these, right? If I were always to know which outcome, then I could always make the correct decision, right? I would do the up decision. I would choose the high case if the stocks went up, and then if the stocks were flat or down, I would choose the savings. So my expected value having all of that perfect information is $1,000. So the expected value of the perfect information is equal to $1,000 minus 580. So that information is worth $420 in this case. So the basic idea is you have the exact same system. You always know, if you could always choose the best outcome for all of the probabilities, then how would you value that? And the value of that information is the difference between what you could make in sort of the best possible scenario versus the expected value in the original problem. And so this is a nice way and really sort of logical way of being able to figure out how much you should pay for information or how much you should pay to reduce uncertainty. All right. Any questions with that?
Yeah, I have a quick question. Could you go over again what high and low means? Like, it's the two stock decisions, but
Oh, sorry.
um,
This is stock. I should be consistent here. This is stock 1. This is stock 2. I was denoting them as high and low. It's like a high risk stock versus a low risk stock.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
So, in this, like, the information you're knowing ahead of time is that both of them will go up or stay flat or go down.
Yeah, exactly. It's you can think of it as like a coupled sort of decision, or coupled probability. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Any other questions or confusions about this? Okay. If not, let's soldier onwards. Okay, back to the slides. So one of the things that maybe you're thinking of when we're talking about these decision trees is like, okay, like that Texaco Pennzoil one, maybe you think that, that going to court and then possibly losing all of that money, even though like the expected value is higher, like being able to take the settlement is a guarantee, right? And so all of these decision trees thus far that we've been doing are related to like this decision-making process in which you're just relying on expected values. And expected values really have to do with the fact that if you did it many times, like at the end of the day, your average value of making a particular decision is that calculation. But unfortunately, in the real world, right, you don't get to make that decision an infinite number of times, right? Most decisions, including the ones that we're talking about in all of these examples, are only sort of quote unquote played once. And so that may actually kind of change your decision-making behavior. And we don't actually call that like irrational, right? Because there can be different sort of risk preferences for how we value, probabilities that may lead to these negative outcomes. So there's this question, or there's this term risk averse, risk neutral, or risk seeking, which can really influence your decision making. And so we're going to see how we can incorporate that into these types of problems. So just to clarify, so risk aversion means that you don't like taking risks, and that maybe you are willing to sacrifice some of that expected value for more of a guaranteed outcome. Someone who's risk neutral, sort of by definition, means that they're always going to be sort of on the side of whatever the expected value is telling them. And then someone who's risk seeking maybe will make a decision where they value larger payoffs even more, even despite like probabilities with negative outcomes, right? And so you rather than being conservative, you are being aggressive in trying to get higher payoffs. Yeah, so there's this thought experiment. So a coin flip for even if you have the same expected value, a coin flip can lead to really sort of different choices. And so, okay, so think about this thought experiment. So suppose I say, let's say, okay, I can flip a coin, and if you get tails, you get no money. But if you get heads, then you get, let's say, $1. So the expected value of that, right, is 50 cents. You can do that same thought experiment where, or sorry, so, okay, I'm phrasing this badly. So there's let's say I offer you the opportunity to take a bet, flipping a coin for 0 if you get one side and $1 for the other, versus just taking 50 cents straight up. Okay. So if you are risk neutral, then you don't care about either of those decisions because the expected value is the same. But some of you may actually have, a particular choice about whether you take that guaranteed 50 cents or whether you'd rather sort of flip the coin to get double the payoff, right? And in fact, that decision-making process can change even if those two outcomes have the same expected value with different quantities of money. So if I were to pose that question of, say, okay, so think about what you would do. Think about, would you rather flip the coin or would you take the guaranteed 50 cents? And then let me ask you, okay, what about if I offered $1,000 versus $0 or a guaranteed $500? What would you then take, right? And then you could be even more extreme. I could say, okay, let's say I decide to flip a coin for $0 if you get tails, $10 million if you get heads, or would you take a guaranteed $5 million? And so in all of those cases, the expected value is the same, but I'm willing to bet that a lot of you guys would change your decision based on the quantity of money in that scenario. And so that is one way that we can get at sort of eliciting risk preferences for individuals, but I'll quickly sort of say that that even for an individual, the sort of risk preference can change a lot over time, in different situations, over a wide variety of activities. So one really easy example of this is that, most people are sort of by default risk averse, but that behavior can suddenly change if you are like gambling in a casino, or if you're like playing the lottery, right? We find that oftentimes reverts, that if you actually measure their like behavior, that suddenly they're becoming more risk seeking. And again, that has to do with the sort of psychology of the situation and your sort of personal risk profile and how that changes. Right, okay, so I actually did have a slide on this. So that problem that I just talked about, so like by default, I was talking about risk aversion. There's this concept of loss aversion, which is related, where if you lose $100, the utility that you lose, in other words, the usefulness of losing that $100 is larger than the gain in utility from winning $100. And that's why in these coin flip situations, most people take the guaranteed outcome because the negative utility from quote unquote losing, we're not being able to get anything, is larger, outweighs the benefit of like getting that extra amount. And one of the, I think one of the reasons for this is that the like marginal value of the extra dollar is worth less than the first dollar. In other words, if you have no money, like being given $10, the like value of that $10 is worth a lot more than if you're, say, a billionaire and someone gives you $10, right? And so in a really sort of logical way, the marginal losses end up being greater than the marginal gains. Okay, so we can use this to our advantage to restructure the decision tree types of problems that we were just talking about in order to accommodate things like risk preferences. So let's go back to that example with the stocks and show how to apply that. So typically there is some kind of like a risk function that determines the utility related to some like quantity of money. So utility, right, is like the value that you're getting out of that money. And so generally it's nonlinear, and it follows, if you're risk averse, it will typically follow this nonlinear pattern where, like I was saying, the money at the end is worth less than the money at the beginning. And so you can really easily see that in this example, right? So if I go from 1,500 to 1,000, that is a $500, and that utility of that $500 is 0.14, right? It's the difference between 1 and 0.86. But the first $500 is worth 0.65. So that's worth quite, like that first $500 is worth quite a bit more. Okay, so knowing that, let's go to this. Let's redraw this problem real quickly. So high, low savings. Oh, sorry, again, this will be, so stock 1, stock 2. And you have up, flat, down, up, flat, down, and savings here. So this is 0.5, 0.3, 0.2, 0.5, 0.3, 0.2, and you have 500, negative 100, 200, 1,000, negative 1,000, 100, and 1,500. Okay, so hopefully you guys are all kind of clear on how we calculate the expected values, but now we're going to calculate the expected utilities. So instead of using the dollar values, we're going to use the corresponding utility values. So that's going to be 1 here for 100, it's 0.46. For negative 1,000, it's 0. For 1,000, it's 0.86. For 200, it's 0.52. For negative 100, it's 0.33. And for savings, it's 0.65. Okay, so you've got these guys like this. And the expected utility calculations are going to be stock 1 is going to be equal to 1 times 0.5 plus 0.46 times 0.3 plus 0 times 0.2, and this is equal to 0.638. For stock 2, this is equal to 0.86 times 0.5 plus 0.52 times 0.3 plus 0.2 times, oh, so for point, be consistent here, 0.33 times 0.2, and this is equal to 0.652, and then the last one, savings, is equal to 0.65. Okay, so now I can see that compared to a risk neutral person, this utility function that is risk averse would prefer to invest in stock 2 because I'm like taking into account the fact that like stock 1 is riskier in sort of my own in whatever perception this this function is capturing. So in this case, your decision would actually be to choose stock 2 instead of stock 1. Okay. Any questions about that? No? Okay. So one of the ways that you can actually measure whether or not someone is risk averse or risk neutral or risk seeking is this concept of risk premium and certainty equivalent. So the certainty equivalent is the amount of certain money that you would trade in exchange for an uncertain lottery. Okay, so okay, why don't we do this with a volunteer who wants to help me with this thought experiment? Anyone?
All right.
Okay. Daniel. All right. I feel like I've asked this kind of question before, but let's say we're doing our sort of coin flip comparison again. And so let's see here. Let's say I do this coin flip and I do $0 to $100. Or you can take the certain payoff, which is going to be $50. Would you rather take the coin flip or would you rather take the certain payoff? Yeah, let's just say someone actually did this to you right now. What would you choose?
I was gonna say, at the moment, probably $50 because I'm pretty broke. But,
okay, so you take the certain...
There are times in my life when I would definitely go for the $100, the chance of $100.
Okay, so let's say same coin flip situation, but instead of $50, I'm only gonna give you $48. What would you take?
Oh, instantly, I'm more inclined to do the $100.
Wow. Okay. All right.
Yeah, to take the chance.
Okay.
And that's only $2 change. That's interesting.
Yeah. What about $49?
Huh.
Well, we're gonna hone in. It's somewhere between 48 and 50
Yeah,
is
yeah.
where this is happening.
I think it's still, I think I'd probably take the 49. That's very weird. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So, okay, let's say $48 is where you kind of decide to make that switch. So we can use this equation to figure out your risk preference. So, okay, based on this behavior, do you think you are risk averse, risk neutral, or risk seeking?
Let's say probably risk neutral-ish.
Well, it's very close to risk neutral, right?
Yeah.
Because what your certainty equivalent is really close to the expected value, but it's not quite the same, right? You're actually willing to take slightly less money. You said you were willing to take $49,
Right?
Right. Okay. So we'll go ahead and figure out these values for you. So the expected value of the bet is $50, right? You have it's 100 times 0.5 plus 0 times 0.5. Okay. And then the certainty equivalent will say you decide to change your mind at $48. So you can see here 48 is equal to 50 divided by 1 plus RP. So then if I multiply across, divide by 48, so it'd be 1 plus RP is equal to 50 over 48. Okay, and if I subtract 1, so RP is equal to 2 over 48, right? Is equal to 1 over 24. Okay, and so we know that you are risk averse because your RP is greater than 0. Makes sense, right? You are willing to take a lower payoff because there's a guaranteed money that makes you risk averse. And this value is okay, relatively small, right? And so you are very close to being risk neutral. But that's a nice sort of indication of your risk premium. And in fact, this is like one way that we can go about measuring people's risk tolerances and risk preferences. And there are lots of studies that do this, and you can do these for like corporation decision making and that sort of thing. And yeah, you can look to the literature to figure out what values of risks or what ranges of risks make sense. But again, like think about my one caveat is like think about how these are derived, and again pointing out the fact that like your risk premiums and such probably change quite a bit as the particular decision you're making like changes in context, right? Because I could be asking Daniel, for example, I bet I could demonstrate a much more higher risk aversion if we were to like up the quantity, right? So Daniel, if I were to ask you, okay, would you take like $10 million in a coin flip versus a guaranteed 5 million? And I'm guessing you would say 5 million, right?
Absolutely.
What if I went down to 4 million? Would you take that over coin flip?
Am I still getting the 10 million if I win?
Yeah. So if we flip a coin, you get nothing. If you lose, you get 10 million. If you win, or you can take a guaranteed 4 million.
Yeah, I'm still taking the 4. You'd have to.
Yeah. What? Okay. How about
go down?
How about $3 million?
I'm still taking 3.
$2 million.
Oh, you're getting close now.
And actually,
I think I might take the 2, but if you go down to 1, I think I'm gonna have to pull the trigger on flipping the
yeah,
coin.
okay, but already we can see that, like, right, you changed your you should have changed your decision at, what was it, $4.8 million, right? But it's really different. And actually, a lot of game shows work this way, and take advantage of like risk preferences. If you've ever, what's the one, with they open all these briefcases? Does anyone know?
Deal or no deal?
Deal or no deal? Yeah, yeah. If you actually like take people's decision making and like put them into this framework of measuring risk preferences, you would find that people are crazy, like insane, making insanely risky decisions, that really they normally wouldn't make. But in the context of the situation that they're in, their like risk preferences change a lot.
Do you think they filter out potential candidates to be on the show based on whether or not they'll make the risky decisions that are entertaining?
No, I don't think so. I think that like the situation that you're in, like it's all framed so that it like transforms you into being really risk seeking, right? And there are ways that do that, because like the uncertain probability, the like high payoffs, the fact that it's like a game show, apparently all these things contribute to like making you more risk seeking. So if you were to like put it down onto like paper, the decision making, and just like in a really calm setting, you would find that people make really different decisions, which is, yeah, very kind of interesting in and of itself. But yeah, okay, all of that is just kind of pointing out the fact that these risk premiums are really volatile. Okay, and so let's talk a little bit about, this is kind of our last example for the day, how you could actually take advantage of the asymmetrical nature of risk preferences that would actually end up in kind of like a win-win scenario. So this is actually how insurance companies operate. They kind of quote unquote take advantage of your risk premium. Okay, so let's say you start with some value of like $2,000. Let's say it's some asset that you have, like a antique book or something, and say 90% of the time nothing happens, but then 10% of the time you have a chance to lose $800 of value, like there's a fire or something and half the book gets burned. I don't know. So let's say you have a utility function defined as u equals 10 times the value of the thing to the 0.3 power. And so this is like a typical kind of function for like a utility function that has shape representing your like risk profile. At what insurance price would you buy insurance? So let's take a look at this problem. So we're going to make another tree. We're going to have a decision where you buy no insurance, and then a decision where you do buy insurance. Okay. So if you don't buy the insurance, then there's 0.9 chance that nothing happens and that your value is 2,000 at the end of the day. And then there's a 10% chance that your value is 1,200 at the end of the day. So I can take these values here and plug them into my utility function. And I would end up with utility is equal to 97.793, right? This is that I get that by doing 10 times 2000 to the 0.3. And then my utility would be 83.899. My expected utility would be 96.404. I get that by doing 97.793 times 0.9 plus 83.899 times 0.1. And this can translate through the utility function back into a dollar value. So if I do 96.404 equals 10 W to the 0.3, then my W would end up solving to be $1,906.84. Okay. And so if I buy insurance in my first decision, then the value that I have is going to be $2,000 minus whatever I paid for insurance. So given my risk preference and what that translates to in dollars, I would be willing to pay this much money for insurance. So 2,000 minus 1906.84 is equal to $93.16. Okay. So that is the quantity of money that I would be willing to pay to actually buy the insurance. So now let's look at it from their perspective of the insurer. The expected value for the insurance company is that 90% of the time, I'm going to be making $93.16. Okay. And that's because I'm sort of taking advantage of what you're willing to pay. But then 10% of the time, I have to pay out the extra value that's lost in this accident, right? And so 0.1, it will be negative 800, but I still do make my $93 still. Okay, and so as long as this number is positive, then I, as the insurance company, will want to offer this protection because I will be making money at the end of the day. And the thing about the insurance company that is different, right, about the decision making is they are actually operating as like a risk neutral entity, because in this case, whereas you as the individual may experience this accident only like a limited number of times, right? You don't get to go through this decision-making process again and again. With the insurance company, you're insuring many, many, many different people. And so you are operating under like a scenario in which you're more sort of able to do that that choice like an infinite number of times. I mean, I know it's not actually infinite, but enough times where you are really getting to expected values and therefore being able to take advantage of like a risk neutral position. And that is where you are essentially able to capture the value that individuals are willing to give up because of their risk preferences. And that's what this sort of positive value represents. Okay. And so, any questions about that? Okay. We will end here for today. And so again, quick note, homework 2 has been posted. It'll be due next Wednesday. And then I've also posted some instructions, or I will also post instructions about our class project. Again, you can partner up with someone, but we'll start to have the initial proposals so that people are starting to think about them. And that will be due next Friday. And you do need to make sure to contact me, either meet in a separate meeting or through office hours or through email about the topic you want to do beforehand. Otherwise, we'll end here, and I'll stick around a couple minutes for any questions or concerns about the lectures or homeworks or the project.
So the project description is due at the beginning of class. I wrote down the 8th, but then next Friday is the 5th.
Oh, wait. Did I wrote down the 8th? Yeah, okay, we'll just do it. We'll just do the 8th. That's fine.
Maybe you wrote the 5th and I wrote the 8th. I'm not positive.
Wait, let's see. I can,
Was it?
this is easy to find. 8th, all right, we're doing the 8th.
Okay.
For some reason I had in my head next Friday, but that's fine. A couple
Okay.
extra days, so you'll have the weekend. So yeah, I'll make a post about that as well on Canvas.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.